Hello and welcome. My name's Angie Holden and I'm the blogger behind The Country Chic Cottage. So today we're going to talk about preventing press lines. If you've worked with polyester at all, either with sublimation or even with heat transfer vinyl, you will know that the material itself kind of has a memory and you can get press lines wherever your paper sits in the case of sublimation or your carrier sheet in the case of heat transfer vinyl. So how do you prevent that? How do you minimize those press lines and get those super professional results when pressing with polyester fabric? So we are going to talk about sublimation today. However, these same type of techniques would apply to a heat transfer vinyl design. So if you're using heat transfer vinyl, please feel free to go ahead and watch. So what we're going to use is two different methods of preventing press lines. We're going to use pressing pillows as well as some foam. So we're going to kind of do both of these, compare and contrast the benefits and drawbacks of both. And I'm also going to press a shirt and actually get some press lines and then press a shirt with both of these methods and show you that you don't get press lines with these two. So let's dive in and take a look at both of these a little bit closer. Okay, so here are two different options. These are pressing pillows. So they come already in cut to size in a variety of different sizes, and they come with a Teflon sheet on both sides, and it's already sewn together into a little package. Now you would need one of these for every size you need. So every different size of shirt or design, you may need a different pressing pillow. Now the other option is to buy this foam on a roll, and as you can see, I've already been cutting some off these for a variety of projects here. So it's basically approximately the same foam that's in these pressing pillows, and you just cut it off to the size you need. However, you do need to cover this with protective paper, and you run the risk of ink getting on this foam, and then you would need to toss it. With the Teflon that's on these pressing pillows, you shouldn't ever have problems with the ink getting on the surface. So these would last basically forever. And this, if you ever got ink on it, you would probably have to toss it. So just note that. But this does come on a roll, and you can cut off as much as you like. All right, so I have 3 shirts. They are all the Cricut brand of shirt, 95% polyester. We're going to do one of these with a pressing pillow, one with the foam, and one without anything, and I'm going to try to get the press lines on it so you can see it. I'm going to use the same time, temperature, and heat press for all 3 and different designs. So I'm going to go ahead and print out some designs, and then we'll take a look at what you need to do, like the sandwich, the sublimation sandwich basically that you need to make with your pressing pillows and the sizing and that type of thing on each of the shirts. So let me go print out my sublimation designs and then we'll take a look. All right, so here are my 3 sublimation prints. Now these are printed on my Epson EcoTank printer that I've converted to sublimation with Hippo sublimation ink, and I will link to a video below where I did this. So I have all 3 of these. We're going to use this one for our first experiment on this white shirt. And I printed all of these on a sublimation paper, just so you know that. All right, and then each of the shirts, I went ahead and pre-pressed them. So pre-pressing is important to remove any moisture and wrinkles, so I went ahead and did that. And the first one we're going to do with no pressing pillow, and look at the lines that you can get on your design. So I'm going to do this like maybe instinctively you would think to do this. So you would probably cut around your design. You would lint roll your shirt. Then we would put the design where we want it on the shirt. And then tape that into place. This is heat resistant tape. So we'll take our piece of protective paper and we need to put it inside of our shirt. So the first thing I'm going to do is just trim this one a little bit, add to the inside of my shirt. Then you can put another piece of protective paper on top. I'm going to add this to my heat press for the recommended time and temperature, and then we're going to take a look at the results. And then we're going to see how to use the pressing pillows and the pressing foam so that you get better results. All right, so let's pull back our design. This is still kind of warm, so I have my heat resistant gloves on. And you can see our cute design that's been transferred to our shirt. But let's zoom in and take a look at this outer edge so I can show you what I'm talking about with press lines. So hopefully you can see right in there, you can see where our paper was located. This one is even more prominent. See right there, you can see where the corner of that paper was. So that is where the polyester material basically has a memory. And as you're pressing that paper into it, and we can see it on this corner as well right here, as you're pressing that paper into it, it indents into the material and the polyester remembers that, and this is permanent. So this will not come out when you wash it or anything like that. So the press line on this, and you might be able to see it around there, is a permanent feature. So what do we do about that? Let's take a look. All right, so now let's press that same shirt, same design. This time let's use the foam. So we'll use the foam first. So the first thing on this print, instead of using my scissors like you might be instinctively wanting to do and trim around your design, you can rip it instead. So ripping this design means that the edge won't be straight anymore. It will be tapered. And you can see that I'm ripping way out here. And that is so that I have room on the inside, because you want your foam to be smaller than your paper, but larger than your design. So we are going to have the foam rest along this area. So we'll just rip each of the edges to get an uneven edge that won't leave as bad of a mark when we press. All right, so next up is I'm going to use this piece of foam, and I need to cut it where it's larger than my design but smaller than the paper. And you can just cut this with regular scissors. So what I like to do is put my design down and then put my foam down and just make sure it'll rest inside of the paper but covers the entire design, and this one does. So now we need to add this to our shirt. So first we will lint roll everything. And then we can put our design face down on our shirt. And we'll add a few pieces of tape. And then we're going to take our foam and put it inside of our shirt. And then something we didn't talk about was pressure. So with a sublimation design, you want probably medium to light pressure depending on your surface, especially on fabric. So I was probably using a little too much pressure on that last shirt. What you want is enough pressure where this foam goes down by about half, but you don't want to compress the foam completely in your heat press. So you will need to watch that pressure and maybe set it with, you know, a shirt and a piece of foam, or a piece of fabric and a piece of foam, before you start your sublimation design. So like a scrap piece of fabric would work. Okay, so I'm just going to arrange this foam where it's in the right location. All right, so that is under my design, but the paper hangs over the edge. And now I need to put a piece of protective paper between the foam and the shirt. So once again, remember, I do not want any ink to get on that foam because I would then have to throw it away. So we want to make sure that we have protective paper in there. And a piece of protective paper on the top. And now we can press this design. This one's pressed, so let's take a look at the design. Once again, everything looks amazing, but this time I don't have those press lines around the outside. So let me get this foam out of here and the paper. And then we can zoom in and take a look at this shirt as well in comparison with the other. On this one, if there were any press lines, they would be probably up in like this area or down the sides, because that's how big my paper was, remember? So that's how you minimize those press lines and get yourself a more professional looking result out of your sublimation shirts. All right, so for our final shirt, we'll use the pressing pillow. So I did this onesie on purpose because the other function of the pressing pillow is on shirts like these. These seams can cause your design to be really faded. So what happens is your heat press hits those seams and it doesn't press as much down on the design, which is in the center. So the heat press is basically resting on the seams instead of where it should be on your sublimation print. Another function of the pressing pillow is to help with that issue with the seams and make sure your heat press gets down on your design and doesn't sit on these seams at all. So we're going to do the same procedure. We are going to rip around the edges. So now you may be saying to yourself, do I have to print, even though this is a small design, do I have to use a full sheet of sublimation paper? The answer is no, but you'll need to get pretty specific with the size of your foam or your pressing pillow to make sure it's inside of your paper. So if I was to make, printed this on half a sheet of paper, I would have to be pretty specific with the size of my pressing pillow. Whereas this one, I'm hoping that this pressing pillow here will work, or I can try another size, and I think that one will work better. So this one covers my design, and yet there is room around where my paper is. So this functions the same way, has that foam inside. We want to make sure our pressure is set where it doesn't squish the foam completely, but does it about halfway so we get that appropriate pressure to do our sublimation. So now, once again, we're going to lint roll. We are going to add the design and locate it onto our shirt. And then we'll put a few pieces of tape. And then we'll just want to undo this onesie and add that pressing pillow up underneath. Now, something that is a little bit easier about the pressing pillow, because it has that Teflon sheet, it is slick. So it is easier to locate inside there, whereas the foam kind of hung to my fabric a little bit. And then optional, we could add a piece of protective paper just as extra assurance. You wouldn't have to have this because it is the Teflon, but always like to be safe. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. And make sure everything looks okay. Add protective paper over the top. And now we can head to our press and press this version. And this one we'll just remove everything and remove that design. And that is adorable for a onesie. And then we can remove that pressing pillow and paper from the inside. So you can see that we got a really great print, and I don't see any press lines or anything, so they would be, way along the outside edge as big as we made our paper, and I don't see anything at all. So definitely a way to get those professional results from your sublimation crafts. All right, so we pressed these super cute shirts and talked about preventing press lines with the additional benefit of, with this polyester onesie, of avoiding the problems with these seams on the side. So the pressing pillow or the foam would also have the benefit of lifting that shirt up so that your press doesn't sit on those press lines. And you can see we got a super vibrant print with that pressing pillow inside of this one. So either way you want to go, I don't think you can go wrong. So let's talk about like benefits and drawbacks of both. So the benefits of the foam is that you can cut it to the exact size that you need for each press. Now, the drawback of that is if you cut it too small, then you have to cut another piece the next time you want to press. So that can be a benefit and a drawback, I feel like. And then the main drawback of the foam, I feel, is that it's not covered with anything protective. You have to remember to put that protective paper on there. If you ever mess up, get ink on the foam, you're gonna have to toss it. And then if you ever mess up, cut it too small, then there's no going back from that. And then if you cut it too big, then you'll have to trim some of the side pieces, and those small pieces you trim off the side would be scrap. So there may be more scrap with the foam option. With the pressing pillows, so I just have like 6 varieties here. There are many sizes you can buy, and you have to have a size for every type, for every size of shirt or press that you're gonna make. So, storage. Either way, kind of be storage, but you would need room to store these. I do love the fact that they have the Teflon sheet on both sides, and so that, I did go ahead and use the protective paper anyway, but if I messed up, I would be less likely to get any ink on these, and so less likely to have to toss this once it had ink on it, that type of thing. And then, there is no cutting these. So if I only have this size on hand, like this is the smallest one I have, and I need to make this onesie, that would be impossible. So I would not have an option for that because I cannot cut this or trim this or make it any smaller. I would either have to order the proper size pressing pillow or do without somehow. So that is kind of the drawback of the pressing pillow. But I do think they both work wonderfully. I tend to keep both in my craft rooms. I keep the most common sizes that I use with the pressing pillows, and I use those for those common sizes, and then I keep a roll of this foam for those super uncommon sizes. So maybe I only make onesies like just if I'm going to a baby shower, maybe a few times a year. I wouldn't want to keep this Teflon pillow on hand perhaps, but I could keep the roll of foam on hand and just cut a piece whenever I needed it, make my onesies for my baby shower, and be set. So I see a place for both. You just have to weigh which one works best for you, works best for the type of crafter you are and the room you have, like which one would work best for you. So I will link to all the supplies below, including where I usually get my pressing pillows as well as where I get my foam rolls. And then you can decide from there which one you want, purchase the right one, and start getting rid of those press lines on those shirts. And I know for a fact you will be so much happier with your sublimation projects. So thank you all so much for joining me today. If you have any questions about anything we've covered, please ask those in the comment section below. If you like this video, learn something new, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't already, head on over to our YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button. We have crafty videos every week and you don't want to miss any of those. So thank you all so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.